RIA Novosti is also reporting that in Zaporozhye region, 3 Leopard tanks and 3 German-made Leopard tanks and 2 US-made Bradley infantry fighting vehicles were destroyed as a result of unsuccessful counteroffensive operations of the Kyiv regime's forces and as a result of Russian long-range artillery strikes. Let's go through some details here. So 3 Leopard 1 A5 tanks and 2 M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles have been destroyed by strikes as a result of strikes in Ukrainian-controlled parts of Zaporozhye region. Sergei Lebedev, coordinator of the Nikolaev pro-Russian underground, told RIA Novosti. This is the very same person, by the way, that reported about neutralization of a group of mercenaries from United Kingdom and Canada that I mentioned minutes ago. And we have quote from statements of Lebedev that he said during his conversation with RIA Novosti. So Rabotina counterattack was a thwarted counteroffensive, basically, of the Kyiv regime's forces. 2 US-made M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles were destroyed. Up to platoon of infantry, enemy infantry, was dispersed. And the Malaya Takmachka settlement, also in Zaporozhye region, the result of artillery shelling from Russian side, 3 Leopard 1 A5 tanks were destroyed. Lebedev told RIA Novosti, a news agency. He added that as a result of strikes in Malaya Takmachka, also bunker shelter of the Ukrainian armed forces was destroyed. And well, this is quite a significant losses, isn't it, on side of on Zaporozhye sector of their front line. Let me now show you settlements that's been mentioned in this previous few news. So this is Novoandreevka settlement, dear friends, on the southern western side of Orekhov city, where British and Canadian mercenaries were neutralized, and there are also 7 of them were captured. So this is that settlement. And I guess because settlement itself did not yet marked in a gray zone or as a disputed between the sides, I guess potentially Russian DRGs were operating in vicinity of this settlement, and it was Russian DRG's operation that basically eliminated this foreign mercenary unit. And this is a Malaya Takmachka settlement, by the way, on the southern eastern side of Orekhov city in Zaporozhye region, where 3 Leopard 1 A5 tanks were destroyed. And when it comes to Rabotina, many members of our community, of course, are familiar with this settlement. Kyiv regime's forces, for whatever reason, take on a suicidal operation to conduct an offensive towards Rabotina. And I guess in this gray zone, these units of Kyiv regime, armored groups of Kyiv regime that were operating with assistance of 2 M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles were neutralized. So I will say significant activization in the Zaporozhye sector that lately is relatively calm compared to other sectors of the front line. Let's continue with some more news now, dear friends. And when it comes to German-made Leopard tanks, obviously Leopard 1 A5 tanks are obsolete at this point. They are very older. They might have a proper gun and their fire system in general, but armor of those vehicles are definitely not up to the task. And it's not just Leopard 1, by the way. Even Leopard 2 tanks are not necessarily obsolete, but quite vulnerable, because we have this report that Rostec, Russian corporation in defense industry, has identified vulnerabilities in the protection of the German Leopard 2 tanks. So Rostec specialists have studied the German Leopard 2 tanks that were captured by Russian forces, and there is quite a number of these tanks now in Russian hands. and identified serious vulnerabilities in its defense. The state corporation told RIA Novosti the capture of the Leopard 2 A6, which is one of the latest models, by the way, of these Leopard 2 tanks, was handed over to the state corporation's experts to evaluate its military technical characteristics. The Leopard 2 tank, and we have quote here, Leopard 2 tank studied by our specialist has been found to have vulnerabilities in its protection. They are related to both their thickness and the composition of the armor and their internal layout of the combat vehicle. The tank's survivability may be insufficient in modern warfare conditions. For example, when attacked from different angles by drones with a cumulative warhead and modern anti-tank missile systems, Rostec said. Experts have concluded that Leopard 2's protection is focused on classic anti-tank factors typical of past decades and does not fully meet today's requirements. Rostec also noted that Ukrainian armed forces are armed with various versions of their outdated Leopard 1 tanks, which have largely lost their effectiveness. And we have another quote. Today, the most adapted to the modern combat operations serial tanks are the Russian T-72B3M, T-80BVM, and T-90M vehicles. They have improved all-rounder protection against drones and anti-tank missiles, from anti-cumulative grids to dynamic elements and other devices, the state corporation concluded. And well, I can understand if some members of our community from Germany or UK or US will dispute the statement of Rostec that Russian tanks are more adapted to modern warfare because these countries that I mentioned are producing, Germany produces Leopard 2 tanks, UK Challenger 3 is supposed to be in production now, which is continuation of Challenger 2 models, and the US is, of course, used to produce at least Abrams tanks. I'm not sure if Abrams is still produced in US. As far as I know, Pentagon was looking for some new vehicle that can potentially take the place of Abrams tanks in upcoming decades. But anyways, I think due to quite a vast combat experience that Russian tankers, Russian engineers have now in regards to Russian tanks, obviously, most likely Russian engineers are in a better position to basically make sure that Russian tanks are better adapted to modern warfare than tanks from hostile countries, let's say. It should not be surprised anyways, isn't it? Interesting news, I think manufacturer of the Leopard 2 tanks, Rheinmetall, that is, if I remember correctly, probably will pay close attention to statements from Rostec. And I'm quite sure they are also studying experience of Leopard tanks in the zone of special military operation to improve, first of all, protection of these tanks, because when it comes to firepower, Leopard 2s are right there next to best MBTs in the world. Russian ones, US or the British. But protection, that is a whole different story. And weight, by the way. Achilles heel of Western tanks is weight. Despite heavy protection, they are still vulnerable for drones, and because of this focus on frontal protection, especially, they are just extremely heavy, and this is a big issue. And when it comes to tanks, by the way, we have this report that I shared on my Telegram and Twitter X page that US officials, according to ABC, question use of Australia's retired tanks as vehicles, as useful vehicles for Ukraine. So US officials question the wisdom of sending Australian Abrams tanks to Ukraine. ABC reports their ABC confirmed that the process of loading the first of 49 vehicles into a cargo ship had recently begun, but the 49 Abrams tanks were promised to Ukraine, by the way, by Australian government. So first batch is already being loaded on vessels and probably are either on the way towards some of the European countries, then to reach Ukraine, or maybe those tanks first batch is already in Kyiv controlled territory. We just don't know it yet. But anyways, as I said, first of 49 vehicles already been placed in the cargo ships, but the government would not discuss their current location of their expected arrival or their expected arrival date of these tanks in Europe for security reasons. The Americans remain secretly disappointed by Australia's decision and doubt the effectiveness of the vehicles on the battlefield. Last year, before Donald Trump returned to their presidency, we warned the Australians that sending these Abrams tanks would be difficult and that when they finally got to their battlefield, the Ukrainians would have a hard time maintaining them. One US official told ABC on conditions of anonymity. And we have quote here, we are beginning to wonder whether the Ukrainians really want these vehicles. The roof of their tank is their weakest point of their Abrams, and this is a drone warfare, the US officials said. And it's not just the roof, by the way, of the tanker. Basically, side armor and with exception of frontal armor, Abrams is extremely vulnerable, as any other Western tank is, by the way. Right, and on top of that, these tanks are extremely heavy and they're difficult to maintain. These Western tanks, including Abrams, by the way, and I guess US officials were opposing decision of Australia to transfer these 49 retired Abrams tanks because they don't want to see on the battlefield more burned down Abramses, right? Because this is not a good optics for US military industrial complex. That's what US officials probably care most. Just hardly they care about Ukraine or Ukrainians, by the way, for sure. Dear friends, if you like my work, please help me to maintain and basically save this independent media project. You can assist through several ways. You can buy me coffee through Coffee platform, or donate through PayPal and Boosty platforms, or you can subscribe to my Patreon page or on page that I have on the Boosty. All the links are on this video description box and in the pinned comment, including crypto address. Many thanks to everyone who already helped. Truly grateful.